Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see your face. And first of all, I wanted to sort of ask how you're holding up. As I was saying, I know you're in social isolation right now after your trip. How are you doing? How's the family?
I will just say, well, they're not here. I've been here by myself, and so it's the first time in my life I've gone until today. Literally, somebody came by today to drop off this order I had to sign to declare an emergency. I hadn't seen a person for 9 days, like literally had not seen a human being, but thank God for technology. I mean, this is pretty basic stuff, but I've been able to conduct news conferences. In fact, I announced the declaration of the emergency by Skype. I've had all kinds of teleconferences, very basic technology, but if it wasn't for that, I would have felt completely isolated, and I'm sure it makes me understand how people who are alone, older people who are isolating like people are supposed to be, would be very, very lonely if they didn't have a network of people. I've been so busy, I haven't had time to think about being lonely, but I've only got 3 days left out of the 14, so we're looking forward to the end.
Well, I'm sure your staff's really looking forward to you getting out of there.
You know what the worst part, because I never had used Skype before. I mean, I was always giving press conferences in my office, and so you were on my staff, you know this. I now know how to go on live TV from anywhere I want. And this is fantastic. I mean, I can now totally shake off the constraints of the people place on me and give news conferences and comments anytime I want. It's great.
Yeah, I'm sure they'd be really worried about that if it hadn't taken you 20 minutes to get on this particular call.
I gather the problem is your end, not mine. I beg your pardon.
Okay. So let's get to business. There's a lot of people on this, watching this right now who care a lot about our city, who care about their loved ones, and they want to find a way to help. So what is the number one thing that you think people should be doing to help out the city right now?
I'm really serious in saying this. This is not a trite sort of answer. This is the truthful answer, is follow the rules yourself, because I'll bet you there's a few on here. I saw when I logged on, there were 3,000 people. I'll bet there's a few that aren't doing this because they think the social isolation, kind of social distancing thing is, fake news or something. You've got to do it. I'm telling you. And then you've got to convince your friends to do it. I mean, you probably have friends, each and every one of you, who spent the weekend kind of walking down a crowded sidewalk or in a crowded park. The history has shown us from the countries that have had terrible devastation from this, Italy, China, and others, that when you can really shut a city down is when you start to break the back of this thing, because it is now community transmission. First, it was people coming in from other countries, and now it's grown to being much more the United States, which is why we closed the border, an unprecedented thing to do. Now it is community transmission, people who haven't necessarily traveled anywhere, but who have given it one thing to another, which is why we're saying to people, stay home. Stay away from work from home. Don't go shopping more than once a week, because a lot of us are now, even oldsters like me, are into fresh food and wanting to have things more frequently. But we just got to cut out all that behavior. And even when we're seeing a friend on the sidewalk, don't cross the street to give them a hug, wave, and kind of move on. I'm sorry, it doesn't sound like great news, but it's the truth of the science as to how we stop this thing from spreading, because otherwise the consequences that we've seen in places like Italy, where they make this too late, can be catastrophic.
And I know you and I were on a call earlier this week, Mike Serbinas, the CEO of League. And I think, he made a good point that's important for people to think about. If you're worried about your job and your employment, this has a direct correlation with how our economy is going to do and how our businesses are going to recover, right? The sooner we can get this under control, the more hope we have to rebound the tech sector and the economy in general.
In true respect, Siri, and I was so pleased to hear Jamie, who I'm not sure what Jamie it was, but I just heard him through my ear before we got on here, talking about how there will be a period after this bad thing we're going through where we'll have great creativity and great business formation and so forth. And I hope, of course, that a lot of the businesses that are on here now and that are already formed in this great city, will be able to recover. And we'll come back to that, I'm sure. But I think you're right. Like, the sooner that period starts, because they've given us the all clear to go back out to work and to go back out to creating businesses and doing things, then the sooner we can get back to what I think can be a very robust recovery, because we were in such great shape before. But that totally depends on how we take that curve. And if you've seen in the paper the curves for Korea, Singapore, places that have been through it and come out the other end in better shape, they had to have quite draconian periods of isolation and people staying at home and whatnot. And we're just now into the serious phase. I mean, we've been doing it for a week, but it's really going to get serious with the order that Premier Ford and the orders that I made today really indicate to people, look, we've got to do this without fail.
I describe you to everyone as draconian, so it's good.
Yeah. But anyway.
So everyone's staying at home. We have a lot of really smart, really caring people on the line right now. What are ways that they can help? Are there things they can do to support small business? Are there things they can do to help the vulnerable in the city, of whom there are many? Are there places to volunteer?
Well, yes, let me start with the fact that I heard one of the excellent guests on a little while ago talking about how businesses could write themselves and draw up plans to sort of restructure themselves temporarily. And I think one of the best things that a lot of people on this phone could do is help each other, because there are people who will have been great at starting up a business and having an idea and developing an app, but maybe not so good at having gone through an experience where you have to take a business and kind of temporarily restructure it. So I think that's number one. And that may sound selfish in the context of, not helping in the community. Number two would be to take the technology that you know about better than I and find ways to help us fight this, because information and data, of course, are key, the testing data and all those kinds of things. But I'll give you an example of something we're doing now, and it may or may not help much. I don't know, but I asked for it and I'm getting it, which is we had the cell phone companies, give us all the data on the pinging off their network on the weekend so we could see where were people still congregating, because the biggest enemy of fighting this thing is people congregating close together. So we will see from that data a heat map. You all probably have ideas of similar data that your app or something you know of can produce for us, and you may not think it's useful, but let us figure that out, because we just need more and more data about people's habits and about things and other applications you may think of that relate to everything from the shortage of personal protective equipment we have, through to compliance, through to with the orders that we've got to shut down, and a host of other things. And so if you have the technology or ideas on technology, we would welcome those. And then finally, and not least important by any means, what you asked about, there's several big efforts underway in the city to look after people who are particularly vulnerable. And it isn't so much the homeless. I mean, we're on top of that, and that's something the government best does. But it is people like the elderly who normally are able to go out and look after themselves, get their own groceries, but all of a sudden they've been told to stay indoors because they're most at risk. And we're trying to develop old-fashioned concept like telephone trees. And that simply means, for some of you who don't know, that there's a whole tree of people who sort of call each other and make sure they're calling senior citizens. You probably have high-tech ways to help us with that. I was talking to the landlords today, all the landlords, and I was pleading with them to give leniency to the tenants. And they said it's very frustrating because people are not coming out of their apartments. So the very high-tech way in which they normally communicate via a poster in the elevator is not working because nobody's in the elevator. So you may have some ideas. These are people, they said, by definition, often aren't online. But they all pretty much probably have a cell phone now. So maybe you have an idea of how we can get them to use technology, starting with the phone, to communicate, because we're having terrible trouble now communicating with those people, including older people, but not limited to them. So I think there's things like that. And then there's organized efforts that are being undertaken, one for example, by the United Way, another one that the city and the United Way are doing together, where we formed like 12 community clusters, and each of those community clusters in different geographical areas are going to take on the responsibility of making sure the food banks are serviced. We have a simple problem, but complex to solve, like the fact that some of the volunteers and people who normally service the food banks and deliver stuff are sick. So we're having to sort of replace those volunteers and figure out how to make sure we get the food to the people who need it, because they can't come to the food bank. So there's all kinds of things like that. And if you, get in touch with us, and it's funny, what I don't have in my head or in front of me is stupid, but I'll make sure maybe you have it before the end of the session. Is one centralized website where you can actually volunteer. We can certainly get that word out tomorrow, but I can get it tonight, something, so you know where to call to get involved in these kinds of things. So those would be three things I would say. Help your fellow tech entrepreneur who may be having trouble and maybe never had to restructure a business. Secondly, help you give us ideas on how we can use technology to fight this thing. And thirdly, help in the community, which you can, even from your own home. You can help by checking in on some of these seniors and helping us use technology to do that.
And I'm going to volunteer. If people want to send their ideas to me as well, the mayor's staff is obviously very busy. If you want to send your ideas to Siri at OneEleven.com, I can help triage those and make those available to the mayor. Mayor, we have 1 minute left. I've seen you deal with a lot of hard things in the time that I was working with you. We had the van attack on Yonge Street. We had the Danforth shooting. How does this compare, and what is the hardest part for you in terms of dealing with this situation?
Well, I don't want to compare them because the Young Street Band attack was horrific and affected fewer people, but it was such a devastating, needless tragedy, as was the Danforth shooting that affected even fewer people, but I think traumatized the city. I think what you've got here is a couple of things. You've got widespread trauma inflicted by the fact that so many people have lost their jobs, just vaporized jobs like that overnight, restaurants, tech companies, people, and so on. And that's very hard to deal with just because you feel so badly when I get these emails I get from people saying a business they built up over 10 years vaporized. And so the governments are trying very hard, as you know, to help. The federal government has been, I think, very activist in having programs that are going to put money in people's pockets. Because the biggest thing I've been told, including by a roundtable I had for the tech community a few days ago, is the question first, liquidity. How am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to pay, whatever else I have to pay? And then corporate liquidity, especially for smaller businesses that don't have a lot of money sitting around. And so in that regard, the things we've done, for example, we have deferred small business and corporate commercial tax payments and residential tax payments for 2 months. And that's for a starter. I mean, if it needs to go longer, we'll have to see what we can do about that. But we're deferring that on the basis that leaves that cash in the pockets of those small businesses and in the pockets of people. The federal government, have, I think, done really well at making sure they can put some cash into people's pockets, both through unemployment insurance, but also to people who don't belong to the unemployment insurance program. And I think there'll probably be a fair number of tech entrepreneurs and film people and artists who don't belong to EI because they're not employees. So the other message I got loud and clear from the tech community, I want you to know, and the only reason, frankly, I convened a session that I'm having, I think, on Wednesday with venture capitalists is that the tech entrepreneurs I talked to and listened to said to me, please plead with them not to just adopt the easy approach and kind of say, we're just stroking every expense off and causing you to have to lay everybody off and just basically cut the place down. They're saying that by pleading with them won't, they're all in business too, but I'm going to plead with them to say, look, we built up something very special in the city. And it isn't just about business and money, it's about people. And that if you are indulgent with these people in terms of having a different kind of business plan that looks to, keep them going as best one can and keep people employed, that's going to shorten up the misery too, right? Self-isolating and killing the virus will shorten up the period of trauma. So too will not as draconian an approach that often, VCs and business people, look, I came from business, so I get that. But we're going to have a meeting solely to say we've got a lot of the big players, a huge list of people, please, protect this goose that has been laying the golden eggs for the last 2 or 3 years that have really put us on the map by, finding ways to help them restructure that don't involve just stroking lines of expense and saying close her down and lay everybody off.
Yeah. And I appreciate that message and everything you've done for the tech sector and everything you're doing right now. So thank you so much. I want to see a picture of myself on that shelf behind you the next time you're doing one of these.
We can work that out. Can I just give one final message to all the people watching? First of all, you have done so much to enhance the reputation of this city over the last, 3 or 4 years, certainly the time I've been mayor. It's incredible. The talent that is you is what I go and sell. I was in London. The reason I'm self-isolated is I was in London selling us as a place to locate R&D centers to create more jobs and so on. So I just say to you, keep the faith. I'm trying to say to people that, especially for most of you are younger than me, as Siri so kindly pointed out at the beginning, but for most everybody, even including people who are older, the time this is going to take, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but it'll be a couple of months at least, is this month in the context of a lifetime and in the context of a career. And we've just got to keep saying, okay, let's look beyond this period. Now, that's why I was so encouraged by what I heard Jamie saying, because we're going to come out of this. We're going to come out stronger if we do what we're told now, and if we help each other now, both help each other in the community and help each other in business. And I promise you, I will get back at championing the sector around the world as I was doing before and right here. And we will be in as good a shape after a relatively short period of time as we were before. So please give some hope to your neighbors, because a lot of them are feeling quite hopeless and helpless right now because they don't know where to turn. They don't know what happened. They don't know what's going on. And in some respects, nobody does. But thank you very much for gathering together and for, I think just being together makes us feel better and makes for great solidarity among Torontonians and tech people in our tech ecosystem. So thank you very much. And thank you, Siri.